For today's interview, I'm joined by one of the most infamous adapters of our time, Wall Street Journal's 2017 Player of the Year, Kate Hamill. Kate, I'm so excited to be chatting with you today.
It's so nice to meet you. I really enjoy being called an infamous adapter.
I mean, like you are. Like I feel like there are people that have like such grasps on canon, and I mean, I can't wait to talk about you and your connection with Jane Austen and like all of that whole canon. But I wanted to gosh, it's just you have such a great connection with the classics. I love, like, meeting playwrights that have such an amazing grasp on, like, a specific piece of, like, our industry or our genre. Like, I was able to chat recently with, Lauren Gunderson and her take
Mhm,
on, like, historical fiction, or, like, Sandy Rustin and her, like, take on farce, and
mhm,
on your website, you talk about how, like, you're deeply passionate about creating new feminist, female-centered classics,
mhm.
both in new plays and adaptations, and, like, I thought that was an amazing way to describe the work that you have, like, created for yourself. So I kinda wanted to know, like, what began your draw to, like, looking into these classics?
Well, there's sort of a longer version and a shorter version of that story. The longer version is even before I started out in theater.
Mhm.
I a core part of my identity is as a feminist human. I was the only 11-year-old with a subscription to Ms. Magazine, and I started out in this business as just an actor, and
Mhm.
not to say just an actor, I still am an actor, but I, like many people who go to theater school, when I went to theater school, I would say the gender breakdown was more or less equal, if not slightly weighted towards non male artists. In
Yeah.
fact, probably three quarters. And by the time I graduated and I started working as an actor, I was working for a couple of years and I was doing fine. But I was very frustrated because I felt like, there just weren't opportunities for
Mhm.
people who did not identify as men. Certainly not in the same. There was a dearth of opportunities and also a dearth of quality opportunities. So
Yeah.
you spend a lot of your time auditioning at that point for wife or girlfriend or prostitute. There's some great roles for wives and girlfriends and prostitutes, but it is very like tertiary to
Yeah.
the hero's journey or the
Oh,
heroine's journey.
absolutely.
And so I was very frustrated by that as a feminist, and also frustrated because people I knew who I had gone to school with were dropping out of the business because they just weren't getting the opportunities. Uh, and I've always been interested in the classics. I regard them as cultural touchstones. So they actually teach us a lot about each other and ourselves.
Yeah.
They're really powerful keystones. That's why we teach them in our schools, but also they're powerful common language for all of us. And so I thought I really want there to be new feminist classics in the world, and
Mm.
new ways to like think about who our protagonists are and what a hero's journey or heroine's journey is. And so I bet my friend $100 I could write a new feminist classic, and
Wait,
essentially,
really?
yeah, I didn't
Oh
have
my
and I didn't have $100 to spend at that time. So I wrote her a check and I said, if I don't have you a new feminist classic in 6 months, you can cash the check. And $100 to me at the time meant I wasn't going to, eat except for ramen. And that was in 2013, and that play was Sense and Sensibility,
oh
and it
my
was my
wait,
first play,
is that
my
really
first
how
full
this
length.
started?
Yeah, really, yeah. I'd
That's
written some short
crazy.
plays before then, but that was my first play.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, Kate, that's wild. I did
For
not
for
expect that.
anyone listening out in the world, my I highly recommend as a way to accomplish goals is write a check you don't want
You
cashed.
don't want it cash. Oh,
Negative
that's amazing.
consequences.
Oh, that's so good. I mean, well, I'm so glad you made that bet because obviously, like, there's been such a massive reception with the theater industry and your work. I mean, I said it at the beginning, but you were like Wall Street Journal's 2017 Player of the Year. Huge accomplishment, amazing. And you're
Thanks.
constantly being mentioned in the like most produced playwrights of like of the year list. Like so many people are so receptive to your classics or to your work with the classics. I mean, your work in general, but especially with the classics. What do you think you do with the text that makes these so relatable and so loved and so maybe not palatable is not the right word, but so maybe understandable to the audience?
Um, I feel like if you happen to fall into a place where a lot of people are responding, it's because you happen to um, be trying to fill a need in yourself that a lot of other people are also feeling the void of. So I've
Mhm,
just been lucky is a fair amount of that answer. But I knew that when I started, I knew that I wanted to make things that were irreverent, that stood apart from the classic in question. So
mhm,
I was not interested in making something that was sort of a carbon copy, no copy and paste jobs. Like I wanted something that was surprising, that really answered why this story, why now, that was in conversation with the original, but which was not some, very dramaturgically rigid thing, and that you could have access to and see in a new way, even if you have no relationship with the original. And I
yeah,
knew I wanted it to be like very highly theatrical. You know,
mhm,
the Jane Austens, for instance, like if you're doing a BBC piece, it's very sort of in its way realistic, naturalistic. I knew I didn't want to do realism or naturalism. I wanted to
yeah,
celebrate what's specifically theatrical. I wanted it to be playful, and I wanted it very much to be. Like I treat all adaptations like a new play,
yeah, of course.
so I think of it as a collaboration between myself and an author who is often currently dead. And Nathaniel Hawthorne is dead, but he
Mhm,
and I are quasi collaborating. And I have to bring like a very strong perspective of my own to be in conversation with the original
yeah,
story. And thus, these are new pieces with often a quite different viewpoint than sometimes the original. And yeah, so I felt like there was a hunger out there for irreverent stuff for sure, but I also felt like, much like me, lots of people had a loving relationship with classic stories, but wanted them to be more accessible,
yeah,
and not by dumbing down by any means, but by being more inclusive. So that
absolutely.
is why I've been
Yeah, I
lucky.
I mean, I think the accessibility of your work and I wanna talk more about your obvious connection with Jane Austen. I mean, Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, some of, like, the best. I mean, I'm really gassing you up, but I've loved all of your adaptation work, and it's
Oh,
been so
thanks.
wonderful. Is there something specifically about Jane Austen's work that, like, connects you to her or that makes you keep going back to, like, write more pieces that are connected to her canon?
Yeah, I'm sort of on a personal mission. I've been writing plays for something like 10 years
Yeah,
now, uh, and a little over 10 years. And I started with Jane Austen because she was someone who we have a lot of things we're both interested in. She's a proto feminist. She's very interested. She's very, very funny.
yeah,
She's very interested in how people's insides do not match up necessarily with what society
mhm,
demands from them, and I'm very interested in that and in the hypocrisies of people and in societal pressures. So we really lined up, and at the time when I wrote my first one, the vast majority of produced Jane Austen adaptations were all by men, and there's nothing wrong with men adapting Jane Austen or any
yeah,
other female writer, but I was like, well, that feels wrong that there's no female perspective
yeah,
on this. So I'm doing all of her novels in the order that she did them. So I started with Sense, then I did Pride. I've done Mansfield Park, Northanger Abbey, and Emma, and
mhm,
I have basically two more. I'm gonna do at some point Lady Susan, and at some point some kind of version of Persuasion, although it might be like a screenplay or something.
yeah.
But I'm in no rush. I'm on
That's so
number
cool. So you're working through it
five
in
or
order.
something. Yeah. So my most recent one was Emma,
Emma, yeah,
um, and then I have I think like two more. But we were on the same sort of themes, and it's the challenge has been to make sure that every one of them is different as a play.
yeah,
I mean, there are always going to be commonalities in your work, but I wanted to make all of them
stand out on
stand
the
out from each
yeah.
other. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so wonderful. Well, I wanna
Thanks.
take a turn from
Sure.
because I love your work from Jane Austen, but my favorite play of yours, which I love all of them, but my favorite play of yours is your adaptation of Dracula.
Thank
It's
you.
so good. I mean,
Thank
I
you.
just wanna know about the process of, like it's one of your most, I feel like, twisted, like, kind of, like, away from the source
Yeah.
material. Uh, I wanna know, like, what the process was writing it, and then also, Dr. Van Helsing is just, I think she's one of my favorite characters
Thank
I've
you.
ever read. It's one of those shows that I read and I was like, "I really need to see this on the stage." So, tell me about the process of writing this adaptation because it felt completely different from your other stuff in a wonderful way.
Yeah, well, I was approached by Classic Stage Company, which is an
Mhm,
off-Broadway company in New York, about adapting either Frankenstein or Dracula.
mhm.
And I read them both, and I was like, I want to do Dracula because Dracula is so challenging. I
Yeah,
feel like, not that Frankenstein doesn't have its challenges, but I felt like Dracula was intensely, insanely challenging. And the book itself, sorry to any people who love the source text, is quite misogynistic and
yeah,
quite xenophobic. It's pretty transparently anti Semitic in parts. And it is also like the challenge of adapting Dracula is everyone knows the ending,
yeah,
everyone knows it's, when it first got published, maybe there was a little bit more like, oh, what's happening to all these people? And when you're reading it as a modern reader, you're like, it's vampires, dummy, like you're so much farther ahead of it. And
yeah,
it's got tons of logistical challenges. I mean, in the original, people turned into bats and wolves and blah, blah, blah. But I was really interested. Okay, can I take this source text, which is quite I there are things I like about it or wouldn't have done it, but which it does have some really problematic things and
no,
has been
absolutely.
adapted in really messed up ways before. Like there are versions of this story that are almost rape fantasies. They're so
Yeah,
messed up.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
absolutely. So I was like, can I take this and totally twist it on its ear and in fact make it about a bunch of people who are sort of trying to bite the patriarchy, as we say, like stake
Yeah,
toxic masculinity in its heart and use vampirism as a sort of metaphor for toxic masculinity
mhm,
throughout the ages. Why do we keep on falling for believing, come under the spell of these sort of super predators?
mhm.
So that is where I started from. And yeah, it was a very quick process from the first meeting I ever had with Classic Stage where they were like, do you want to do this to production was like 6 months.
Oh
So it
my
was very
gosh.
fast. So I was also running Little Women in New York, which I was in at the same time. So I was a little bit stressed, but we had like, and we opened it, we closed that show March 9th, 2020. In retrospect, it was a very proud time, but um, I was very interested in sort of turning everything on its ear,
Yeah,
in making it, um, can you how can you tell the difference between someone who's a predator or an abuser and just sort of a normal person?
yeah.
Um, so that is where I came to from, and I
I
knew
mean,
I wanted to.
yeah.
Yeah,
I thought it was something you said earlier about having a conversation with, like, the source material or a conversation with the
yeah,
canon. I feel like your Dracula adaptation speaks lengths to doing that because it really was, like, reading it, I saw Dracula in it, but I saw, like, your feelings on the source material. And, like,
thank you.
yeah, it was really, really cool to, like, see that really, really big, like,
Yeah.
turning on its head and, like, saying like, looking for the politic within it.
Well, and there are things that I like about the source material. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a reason why it is a classic.
Mhm.
I don't think if I really hated a piece, I couldn't work on it because
Yeah.
the whole thing would just be, but this was, what, who really are predators, who really do entrance us, who really do suck our life force. And I thought it was a way I could really get into it. And For me, also, Renfield is canonically female. They're
Yeah.
like Renfield makes way more sense as a woman.
No, 1000%.
Dr. Van Helsing makes way more sense as a woman. Like, so that
Yeah.
is where I came from with it.
Well, it was wonderful. I wanna ask
Thank
a
you.
question now for the playwrights that are gonna be listening, because
Sure.
this is something that I think about all the time, and I'm sure a lot of people do. So many playwrights I feel like are kinda scared or nervous about adapting because there's this weird gray area and this balance of, like, you wanna adapt things that you love, and you don't wanna disrespect it, but you wanna make
Sure.
it your own.
Yeah.
Being, as I said in the beginning, one of the most infamous adapters of our truly, so wonderful. What would be your advice to someone thinking about adapting a work? Is there anything, like, you think about before specifically, like, creating an adaptation or looking into a new piece of source material? Like,
Mhm.
what would be your advice?
I mean, I would say just jump in and bring yourself to it. What does it activate in you? Because whatever it activates in you is going to be the most interesting for an audience. Don't worry about the audience perception of
Mhm.
whether or not you're desecrating the source material, because maybe you are. I mean, these things are not supposed to be. We're theater artists. We're not supposed to make paintings that hang up in a museum, and once they're painted and the viewer is not active. We are people who are making things that are responsive.
Yeah,
So bring yourself to it and just don't worry about it. I mean, if you're going to make something that's so dramaturgically rigid that basically it's exactly the source material duplicated, there's kind of no point. We want to see you in it and your
yeah,
taste in it. And I mean, obviously, obviously that is where I land on it, which is why mine are sort of like cheerful desecrations sometimes. But because I feel strongly that there's not really a point in doing it
yeah.
otherwise.
Cheerful desecration is such a
Cheerful.
great way to put it. I love
Thank you.
that.
Yeah, and I think you just have to follow sort of your own compass on it and not worry about it. People are going to have opinions. I feel like if you love a thing, ask yourself what it is you love and bring that out. And if you hate a thing, fight that in the thing.
Yeah.
It's all doable. I feel sometimes we can get so bound up as playwrights in like sort of what the right thing or the wrong thing to do is, and the answer is actually you should do what you want, because um, trying to follow someone else's rules is not going to work very well. We want to see you. That
Yeah, absolutely.
every work of theater is a work of biography in some ways, and we want to see you and we want to see your viewpoints.
Absolutely. How's it okay, I wanna because I usually end every interview by trying to get a little bit of tea or a little bit of, like,
Oh,
or a little bit of something, and I know you
amazing.
told me beforehand that you have a new play coming out this summer, The Light
Yes.
in the Dark.
Yes.
So give me the lowdown. What is this play about? Where's it going up? What is it?
I have a play that is coming out this summer at Chautauqua Theater Company, and then it is going someplace else that I can't talk about yet, but it is going someplace else,
Cool.
called The Light in the Dark, The Life and Times of Artemisia Gentileschi, about the Baroque artist Artemisia Gentileschi, who is almost the only female artist of the Renaissance that we have tons and tons of canvases from. And she had an amazing life story. She was only kind of allowed to be a painter because her father was a painter, and she kind of bullied her way into doing it. And she was a genius painter. She was
Yeah.
actually a much more talented paint in the style of Caravaggio. She was actually a much more talented painter than her father. Um, and when she was 19 years old, she was quite brutally assaulted by a colleague of her father's, and that led to a series of betrayal in which she was actually put on trial. Uh, and I won't give more away, but she ended up, out of that experience, painting these amazing canvases full of
Yeah.
essentially female rage. Include and sort of transcended that trauma. So this is a play about her life,
That's
and it's
amazing.
brand new. And Jade King Carroll is directing it.
Oh my gosh, that's so
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah. It's. I'm. interested in, another new play of mine that came out just recently is this play, The Little Fellow, that went up at Signet Theater, who's about someone named Harriet Wilson, who was a famous 19th century courtesan in Regency England who
Mhm.
blackmailed all of her famous clients and published her memoirs. And I'm quite interested in these. Uh, some often somewhat overlooked women from history
Yeah.
who are really breaking the rules, and sometimes they're quite. That is not to say they're like perfect hashtag girl bosses, like
No, yeah.
Harriet Wilson was, abused as well as abused. Artemisia Gentileschi had her things too, but like was sort of, as most great artists are, Artemisia Gentileschi also had sort of a delightful ego on her, but I'm very interested in these women. And so the next
Okay.
one's Artemisia.
That's so exciting. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Well,
The light in the dark.
that sounds amazing. I hope
Thanks.
to read it. I cannot wait. I hope I get to see it. Thank you
Thank you.
so much for chatting with me, Kate. This was awesome.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.